Hey, Steve Mignani here doing the Junkyard Crawl at Berniston Auto Wrecking in Berniston, Massachusetts. You know, a lot of people forget about Packard. Today we have the big three, or do we? Of course, the imports have really kind of changed the face of the auto industry beginning in the 1970s. But back in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, Packard was an independent car maker like Studebaker and Crosley and Kaiser. But Packard was one of the big ones. Now, Packard started out in 1899 and built cars all the way through 1958, although the 57s and 58s were rebadged Studebakers. But this is a 1951 Packard Mayfair. It's special for a bunch of reasons. The first is 1951 was the first year that Packard redesigned their car lower and wider, getting away from the pregnant elephant look of 1950 through 1946. This is also the first year for Packard's two-door hardtop body style. Now, hardtop means, unlike sedan, it doesn't have full window frames, doesn't have a fixed B-pillar. Hardtop body design arrived in 1949 at General Motors and was quickly adapted by the rest of the industry. And this is Packard's first example, 1951, of the Mayfair two-door hardtop. Now, this rear window, when it goes down, all of this glass goes down. This is wide open. Likewise, the front door is wide open. And you have the open air feeling of a convertible, but the year-round warmth and security and weather-tight action of a hardtop roof. And again, this is not a sedan, this is a hardtop. Again, first year for the Mayflower or Mayfair. Now, one thing too new for 1951 was the aircraft type tubular shock absorbers. We take a look in here and they're kind of buried in the middle of the coil spring. But right inside of here, in that coil spring, is a vertical tube. That is the aircraft style shock. In 1950 and before, this would have been a lever style knee action shock absorber. And keep in mind too that Packard in 1955 and 6 brought along torsion bar, front and rear suspension. This isn't quite that new or modern, but it is a great example of the next to last Packard body style. And one thing new also for 1951 was the wraparound windshield. It was 5 feet wide, replacing the slab two-piece windshield of 1950 and before. But again, this is modern stuff in 1951, cutting edge. Now, one thing about the 51 Packard that was not cutting edge is under the hood. But before we open that, let us still look. It's amazing. This car's been here probably since 1970, and it still has the grille. Again, nobody robbed this for their man cave or their 50s themed shaboom restaurant. Still here. Look at all that iron and chrome. Just an amazing thing. And something pretty cool too is the marker lights. These lenses are glass, not plastic. And this is a 6-volt electrical system on this one. So the sealed beam headlights on this are 6-volt units. So not that bright, but again, 1955 would bring 12-volt electricals to Packard to keep pace with the V8. Now, speaking of engines, again, in antiques, well, here is a problem. This is Packard's 327. Now, a lot of people think, well, it's a Chevy engine, right? No. 327 cubic inches, flathead 8, not a 6. Look at all those spark plugs on that thing. The thing is, these had 5 main bearings and were very quiet. The Packard was kind of a luxury car, although this was a junior model. The senior Packards had a larger version of this engine, but this is a straight 8, and the whole point of this thing was to be quiet and unobtrusive. Packard made a mistake, however. You know, we got to remember that 1949 brought the Oldsmobile and Cadillac overhead valve pushrod V8 engines, high compression engines. Well, Packard was very late. 1955 is when Packard brought out their 352, the 370, I believe it was, a big modern overhead valve V8. But in 55 was just too late. The market had turned their backs on Packard. And the crazy part is, Packard actually launched a brand new 9-bearing straight 8 engine in 1951. Wrong engine at the right time. So Packard paid dearly for not having a modern engine. But things we do see under here in this 150 horsepower engine are the 2-barrel carburetor right here, and the wires coming off the side of that, those are senders to the Ultramatic automatic transmission under the floorboards. More on that in a second. What those wires do, they send the signal to the torque converter to lock up. And again, more on that in a second. But another thing we see here that's also automatic related, this funky looking thing here that's attached to the radiator hose that has these 2 tubes, these hoses, these metal hoses, tubes come. What is this? This is the transmission oil cooler. The fluid actually goes from the transmission into this and is exposed is separated too from the engine coolant. And this actually cools off the transmission fluid. Now this engine probably runs at 180 degrees, but the transmission fluid is much hotter. So as the fluid makes its way through a small radiator and is separated from the coolant, although it's 190 degrees, cools the transmission fluid where it's pumped back into the automatic, the Ultramatic automatic. But again, this has the optional oil filter right here, and that's something that was very uncommon. You paid extra money for that oil filter, that kind of a deal right there. It's a canister deal, and you know, pretty unmolested under the hood of this thing. But that's a 327 cubic inch flathead 8 with 150 horsepower. A lot of torque, and again, a very, very smooth engine. It's been said you could balance a nickel on its edge on an idling Packard 8, and I believe it. Okay, let's meet on the other side. You go there, I'll come around here, and we'll look inside this 51 Packard Mayfair two-door hardtop. And inside, we don't see a clutch pedal. We just see the brake pedal right here. So no clutch pedal means this has the Ultramatic, which is a 2-speed all-automatic transmission. Here's the shifter right here. And we see right here it says reverse, neutral, low and high and low. So this transmission, you drove it around, you put it in high, and it would shift for itself. It was a 2-speed transmission. If you had to pull a trailer, go up a steep hill, or drive in snow, you put it down into low. But this transmission was designed and manufactured entirely by Packard, which was an industry first. General Motors had the Hydromatic division, which made automatic transmissions for GM, and also for Lincoln, for American Motors, and even for Kaiser Frazer. But Packard made their own automatic transmissions, which was a very strange thing. And beyond that, Packard's Ultramatic was the only Detroit automatic with a lock-up torque converter. Those wires on the carburetor signal a converter to lock up. So what you had in a Packard Ultramatic was the efficiency of a manual transmission, no slippage from the converter, but again, the convenience of an automatic. Another thing we see here is this day 2 little cooling fan, this little puppy right here. What a weird thing. And you'll notice it's a 3-bladed fan with rubber blades. Little switch right here, you turn it off on, it just blows cool air into the car. And this was considered a day 2 item, not sold at a Packard dealer, but kind of a cool little thing. I'm amazed that these rubber blades have not turned into dust or powder by now. They're still kind of flexible. But again, inside this, we see again the hardtop body style. You roll these windows down, and this Mayfair must have been a really nice car when it was new back in 1951. So, you know, kind of sad to see it deteriorating here. I would say there's no real hope for this one as far as restoration goes. It is truly going to crumble if you try to pick it up. And here's the original radio. How cool is that? The AM radio right here. And I've seen these before. Look at, see if we can turn on Percy Faith, maybe some Bing Crosby. No, but here's the little pre-selectors. Metal buttons. Look, these buttons are made out of metal. Back when a car could weigh 4,000 pounds and nobody cared. But again, a neat piece, really. The Packard Mayfair hardtop two-door. First year for Packard's 1-piece window. First year for this modernized body style, getting away from the pregnant elephant of 1950 back to 46. And, you know, the public appreciated these cars, but sadly, the fact that it had a straight 8, a flathead of all things, really kind of hurt Packard. Now, here's one last thing. The V8 that Packard did come up with in 1955 was another entirely in-house design. And although it only made it to 374 cubic inches, I think that was as big as it got, it had 5-inch bore spacing, which means that the cylinder bores were center to center 5 inches apart. It had room to go to 500 cubic inches. The only other American V8 that's that big was the Cadillac 472 500 of 1968 on. So even the big block Chevy, the Mopar 440, had smaller bore spacing. So Packard meant business with their overhead valve V8 in 55, although they never get a chance to really develop it. And that engine was only produced 55 and 6, and they scrapped the tooling. It was over and out. Kind of weird, but they waited too long. And again, the flathead in these things was not in keeping with the Detroit horsepower race. Horsepower sold cars, Packard fell behind. And by 1957 and 58, Packard and Studebaker merged, and Packards were gone. They were Studebakers with Packard emblems on them, kind of embarrassing end. But here we have, you know, the first and last, really, of the mighty Packards here at Berniston Auto Wrecking. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Maggs YouTube channel, hit the like button, and we'll see you around for more real soon.